officers, our guests in the lobby, viewers who are watching. Welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council meeting of the 26th of April, the day after Anzac Day, obviously yesterday. East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai Kurnai, Monero and Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of this land and waters that encompass East Gippsland Shire and enduring relationship with the country. The traditional custodians have cared and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. East Gippsland Council Shire live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. We're doing that now and tonight. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record Council meetings unless approval has been granted by the Chair. That's me tonight. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend Council meetings electronically or in person, and the meeting will be up to the public via live streaming. If Council encounters technical difficulties, which we just did with the live streaming during the meeting, we'll adjourn until the issue is resolved. If the technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. So, councillors and people viewing, a member's attendance can only be recorded as present at the meeting when the member can confirm they meet all three of these criteria. They can hear the proceedings, they can see the other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can be heard to speak. So I'm now going to confirm that with Councillor Van Diggle, Councillor White and Councillor Buckley. So Councillor Van Diggle, can you see us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Great. Can you confirm the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, it is, Mayor.
Terrific. Councillor White, good evening. Can you see and hear us?
I can.
Terrific. Can you confirm the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Certainly can.
Thanks.
I've gone down a rabbit hole.
Good on you. Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Buckley, good evening. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, Mayor.
Can you confirm the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Indeed it is, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Councillor, item 1.2 is apologies. I don't think we have any apologies. Declarations of conflict of interest, CEO.
Yes, Mayor, I have a material conflict in item 7.2, which I'll declare at that point and leave the chamber.
Yep, thank you. Noted.
Mayor, sorry, I have a conflict of interest on 7.2 also as a general nature. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted as well. Thanks, Mr. Canizzaro. Confirmation of minutes. So the last meeting was on the 5th of April, councillors. Can I have a motion that we confirm those minutes, please? Councillor Greeson, Councillor Stowe, did you want to speak to that, Councillor Greeson? Councillor Stowe. Any other councillors wish to speak to the minutes? Are they a true and accurate record of the meeting? I presume so. Thanks, councillors. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, I see Councillor Buckley, you abstained on that vote there. Thank you. Noted. Thanks for that. Next meeting, councillors, is at Nowa, and that's going to be on Tuesday the 17th of May at the Genoa Public Hall, and that's at 4642 Princess Highway, Genoa, commencing at 1:30 p.m. That's great to be out at Genoa. Request for leave of absence. I haven't heard from any of you councillors asking about that, in which case I will move on to open forum. And open forum, first item is item 1.7.1 petitions. And Peter, is that you? No, CEO, you're going to take that one? Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Mayor. Overall in the open forums we have 6 items to cover off on. We have 3 people that wish to speak to the petition at 1.7.1.1, and the first speaker is Miss Julie Mustachdix, sorry, my apologies for stumbling over that, who wishes to speak to the item and is online.
Oh, very good. Okay, Julie, we'll see you online, Miss Julie Mustachdix. I hope I have that pronunciation Correct. So, good evening, Julie.
Yes, hello?
Yes, we have you 10 out of 10, so the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. That was quick, right off the mark. Well, I'd like to say good evening to Mayor Reeves and all the councillors,
Thank you.
including Councillor Sonia Buckley, who I'm going to, I want to support her motion that the council request a comprehensive explanation from the Health Minister. Just a little bit of background. I have moved from Melbourne to Paynesville in the last couple of years, 2 years, bought a block of land and also a house in Paynesville. So I am a ratepayer of 2 properties within the area. I moved to Paynesville because the lockdowns and the drastic draconian measures in Melbourne were getting to me. So I thought, move to the country. But moved to the country. And then, as you can imagine, I'm in one of those groups that decided not to partake in a medical experiment. So I got a termination letter and lost a $85,000 job with quite a huge company, Hanson Construction Materials. And then my plight was, couldn't go to the library, couldn't go to the pool, couldn't go to the theatre. They are the council facilities, but since then I've spoken to many people. People couldn't even go to, and I'm just putting this to the council to show the pain that people have been going through. I've got friends that are not as well off, and they have been accessing the Salvation Army food relief, and they could not even access the food relief because they needed to show a vax passport. Yep. The other side of people that maybe have these passports, they do not realise the extent and the pain that people have gone through. I have another friend, he's mentally challenged. He goes to the RSL every Tuesday night with his friend. They have the 2-for-1 meal, which is not on anymore apparently. He could not even go to something like that. So the amount of anguish that I've seen and not just experienced amongst my own friends is just horrendous over this mandates. Because I have to keep this short and I just want to get my message across. I have thought about this long and hard, and because of the person I am and my background in administration, I thought to myself, what does the council need? Okay, I think the council needs a special interest group to be initiated to make submissions to the council and submissions in regards to legislation. Is there legislation going to be put in place so this will never, ever happen again, where the discrimination against just healthy people has been allowed to happen? The second point that the submissions could be made about is compensation to these people. I mean, these people have been harmed. So, everyone's a council ratepayer. Because we paid our rates, do we get, any compensation on our rates? And I pay rates on 2 properties. So, and also in regards to just the venues, can we get some pool, annual pool passes, theatre passes, things like that? So obviously when, and we're very interested to, as I said, to find out what comes of the request for the comprehensive explanation from the Health Minister. So that is basically what I'd like to put to the council this evening, and if I have to back this up with an email, can someone just advise me of that? But yeah, that's my thing. And as I said, I'm supporting Councillor Sonia Buckley because I think she's going down the right road here. because we all are free, you know, to have a universal right to just live our life. I mean, you know, obviously if someone is sick,
Okay,
yes.
Julie, if you're happy to wind it up there now, and yeah, thanks for your comments. And
Yep.
Councillor's contact details are available on the website should you wish to pursue that line as you just mentioned.
Okay. Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks for your comments and your contribution there. Our next speaker is Michael Murphy, and Michael's here tonight. And Michael, you happy to come up to the microphone? Not yet, I don't think. Is there a button that we need to press to make the little red light glow around the microphone? Just try that, Michael. Now it's a goer.
Can you hear me now?
Spot on, 10 out of 10.
Just before I start, I'd just like to point out that the council is currently discriminating against ratepayers because there's ratepayers just outside the front door here and they're not allowed inside a public building. Now, this evening I'm going to read some notes from a fellow ratepayer from Meetung. So I'll just start. This person is called Erin Beecham, and this is how these mandates have affected her and her family. Serious misconduct. This is what my husband was sacked for in November 2021 from his job for not getting the COVID-19 jab. From the Shire of East Gippsland, by the way. The father of our two young kids, a much-loved son that would toot the bird off the road to safety. A true Aussie that would pull over to help anyone in trouble. He would give his last dollar to someone who needed it more. Everyone that knows my husband thinks highly of him, yet he was fired from a job that he loved, a job that he could do from home, but couldn't work anymore. Serious misconduct is now on his file. When I hear the words, it gives me a chill down my spine. It sounds like he's committed murder. As kids, we're always told to stand up for ourselves against bullies, say no to experimental drugs, critically think, and always ask questions. Yet after asking questions as to what the risk was on my husband and onto the greater community, when he could work without seeing a lot less people than he walks past in a supermarket, there was no attempt for an answer. When the miracle vaccine was, so-called vaccine, was brought to our attention in 2020, it was going to be for the vulnerable, to protect the vulnerable. Whoever felt safer with the vaccine, make sure you go and get it. Then it started to feel like we were being bullied. Our basic rights have been stripped from us without plausible risk assessment. It feels like we were being coerced into a decision rather than having the right to choose. I suffered from a 2-year on and off debilitating illness in my early 20s from a 3-dose trial vaccine. This particular vaccine that I lined up for is now in a $1 billion legal battle over in the United States. I have a right to question and refuse another trial, especially when I hear that the federal government get to choose whether they have it or not and can still feed their families. Some of our family and friends, even though supportive, mention the word choice to us. It's your choice. The problem with our choice is that we have to sacrifice our careers, our financial future, volunteering at our children's school, even taking our kids to the library. At one point, we couldn't even buy clothes for our children from Kmart, let alone an outreach centre. The exclusion, bullying, and being tarnished with serious misconduct will never leave us for the rest of our lives. We have been supportive of everyone that has wanted to roll up their sleeve and keep themselves safe. But all we ask for is compassion and understanding of our choice. All we want to do is be able to put food on the table for our families. Erin Beecham from Meetung. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Mrs. Cossett Murphy. Cossett, you're here tonight. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Thank you. We're well.
Can you hear me?
We've got you 10 out of 10.
Wonderful. I'm also today represent somebody from our community who could not come today. This letter is addressed to Mr. Reeves. I would like to direct my letter to you. I have been traveling for 3 years when I discovered the beautiful land back coast town of Lake Entrance. With absolute delight, I purchased a home nearby and began settling in. As a single older woman, I needed to find my people, so with great excitement and enthusiasm, I began joining groups and making friends. Very quickly, I had found my community. We were only a few months into the pandemic, and I believe one lockdown so far, and I felt that a friendly, caring, supportive community was going to band together, and we will all get through with this. However, the segregation and division began. Within 18 months, I was no longer welcome at my hairdresser or the fitness group I attended, the public pool, and the library. Even the active outdoor local groups on Facebook sneered as they found out I was unjabbed. Feeling vulnerable and isolated, I fell into a dark place. By September 2021, I was contemplating taking my own life. Pulling myself out of that devastating place, I decided to look at the leaders of my community. It was my hope that the members of my council office will show some kindness and understanding. I viewed a council meeting where a few local residents voiced their concerns. And your lack of empathy and compassion was gut-wrenching. I had no idea that a man who is supposed to be involved in the well-being of community could be so disrespectful and callous. I sincerely hope that soon you might understand the magnitude of the isolation that many of us in your community is feeling. I have 2 questions.
So, Cosset, you're welcome to make comments, but...
comments. I'm just finishing.
So, it's not a question time for you, so... So if they're rhetorical questions, you're very welcome to pose them.
Rhetorical questions to you. She said, I would like to know what, as a councillors, are you going to do for our future, for this never to happen again? Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. That's the 3 questions or comments regarding 1.7.1, the petition. So we can move on to the report. Terrific. Thanks, Councillor. So we're on item 1.7.1, which is the petition. And Stuart, are you taking us through that or? No? Peter is? No? It's, Anthony? Yeah, I think you are. Okay, so let's... So
thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
So you will see there is a petition at item 1.7.1.1. That petition was spoken to by Ms Tina Ginion at the last council meeting when it was tabled for council's consideration. You'll see now that there is a number of recommendations there. Obviously, there has been a change in the government policy since this petition was tabled, and we will follow up as the recommendation states there in terms of responding to the head petitioner. So put those recommendations for your consideration.
Great, thanks. Thanks, CEO. So, councillors, there's a recommendation. Have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Sonia. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only to say that we received the petition and Tina spoke to it at the last meeting and we're happy to receive it.
Terrific, thank you. Councillor Buckley. Sorry, you're on mute.
I certainly support the officer's recommendation. I believe that these recommendations should have been implemented way before now. All the speakers, I just wish to say from the bottom of my heart that I feel for what you've gone through. I've been supporting people in that position from the very moment that I heard the state directive. So I'll speak further to the motion in a little bit, but I certainly am very, very touched and moved by your stories, and I'm sure there are many councillors around the table tonight who are. And I thank every one of you for your honest, your honest reports of how you've fared in this very difficult time. So thank you for being brave and speaking up, and you have been heard.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is the motion opposed? Yes, you can. We'll allow that.
So at the moment we have the recommendation in front of us.
Yes,
and,
I have a
Mr.
motion
Chairman,
from Councillor Allen.
Yeah, that the petition be received.
Received, yep.
But also there are some actions there by removing all access restrictions. No?
No.
No, that was what the petition was calling for.
Okay.
Next point's got 3.
I can't hear, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Sonia, yep. Just getting a clarification on the recommendations for Councillor Uri.
I wanted to be clear about what I was voting on.
A and B at clause 2 or paragraph 2
Yes.
is quoting the petition.
Okay.
Paraphrasing it,
Yeah,
yep.
so clause 3 says that we're receiving it,
Yep.
and clause 4 is that council officers will write to the head
Okay.
petitioner.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So you're happy with what you're moving as a motion there, Councillor Allen?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's paraphrasing
Yes, I am.
the comments in the...
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks. The motion's carried unanimously. We'll receive that and move forward on those recommendations. Councillors, we're on to items 1.7.2, and we have a question from Ms Margaret McQueen, and the CEO, you're going to read that question on behalf of Margaret. Is that correct?
Correct, Mayor, yes. So the question is, as the Mayor just stated, from Ms Margaret McQueen. In line with Victorian Government's urban design guidelines, could the Council advise where public open spaces have been planned to support the proposed growth in residential properties in Paynesville? Goes on to say, I proposed a public space for the land at 8 Newlands Drive. How was that proposal received by Council? And I'll refer to Mr McConnell, who had this question and has a response.
G'day, there's Mr McConnell online. Thank you. Go ahead, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So in response, the Paynesville Structure Plan includes information about public open space as part of catering for growth in Paynesville, and includes linear open space through the growth areas, including some trail connections to the larger areas of public open space at the foreshore. And it's fair to say that Paynesville has very significant open space areas set aside already, including the foreshore areas and areas such as Freeman Reserve and Gilson Reserve. As part of tonight's agenda, there's a planning application in relation to 8 Newlands Drive, which is referenced in the question. And 8 Newlands Drive is privately owned. The assessment has taken into consideration the need for and provision of public open space, and noting that the proposal is about conventional residential subdivision within an existing settlement area, and it's an infill proposal. As I outlined previously, there are significant public recreation areas very close to this site. It's close to about 100 metres southeast of the site is the Paynesville foreshore and the Progress Jetty area, which has some significant further development in planning. And there are, as I mentioned earlier, further recreational spaces in the vicinity of the site as well. So the proposed conditions include a requirement for a contribution to public open space that will go to improving facilities and the like in the region in accordance with or consistent with the requirements of the Subdivision Act. So the expectations around public open space are met in the area, and so the development proposal is that there be a cash contribution in this case. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr McConnell. I appreciate that explanation. Councillors, we're going to move now on to item 1.7.3, which is notices of motion, and item 2.1, and there are two speakers in regard to this notice of motion before we bring this notice to the chamber. And the first will be Mr. Robert Love, who's here. G'day, Robert.
Good evening, councillors and staff. Shout out to the YouTube crowd and my friends behind me and outside. I wish to support Councillor Buckley's motion for the Honourable Martin Foley, Health Minister of Victoria, to provide an explanation for COVID mandates and lockdowns. I will make 2 points, and my first point is the history of council advocacy. Rob Spence, former Chief Executive of the Municipal Association of Victoria, said, or quote, "Councils across time have expressed views and continue to express views on international, national and state matters, and it's an appropriate role for council." End of quote. There was a major push out of Victorian councils for the Federation of the Australian Colonies, which ended up in establishing the Australian Constitution, the Federation of Australia. In 1902, many councils advocated strongly for women's rights to vote. More than 50 other councils across Australia took a keen interest in same-sex marriage, citing it as a human rights issue, not a federal government issue. It is well within the council's ability to advocate on behalf of its community. No law is beyond critique, including COVID mandates. I make this point particularly for the lesser experienced councillors that may not be aware of the precedents set by councils in the past. Point 2, evidence-based decision making. I want to present a hypothetical. I'm a man, I work up at Brenambra. I sharpen saw blades for a living, and I work in a retail outlet. Because of the mandates, I was retrenched. I couldn't work there anymore. However, I can go to the footy on the weekend and be in a crowd of 100,000 people. After that, I can go to the pub and celebrate the victory of Collingwood. And then after the pub, I can go to the nightclub and be surrounded by hundreds of people. Yet the bigger risk is for me to be at Brenambra rather than in Melbourne. Where's the science for this? Daniel Andrews says he follows the science. He's got the best science money can buy, yet he cannot provide the reason why this hypothetical situation exists. We have vaccine hesitancy because people look at these situations and can't find the logic in the situation. Someone can work in a store wearing a mask, and at the end of their shift, they can take their mask off and go buy within the store. I can go to the park now, I presume, have a workout, I'm unvaccinated, go for a swim in the pool afterwards, go to the cafeteria after that and have a cup of tea, yet I can't work up there. When government places extraordinary demands on people's freedom, there is an extraordinary duty of care to provide the reasoning and the science for that decision. This is why I support Councillor Buckley's motion. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And we have Miss Tina Genian in person here as well. G'day, Tina.
Hello, everyone. Dear East Gippsland Shire Council, thank you for letting me speak again. I will be speaking in support of Councillor Buckley's motion and the petition handed in by the People's Assembly. As you are very likely aware of my position in regard to the discrimination against the unvaccinated in our Shire, I would like to share with you the perspective of another like-minded person. She used to be employed at Bairnsdale Regional Health Service and is unable to attend today. So this is her statement. Dear councillors, my name is Rhonda Simmons. I have worked for BRHS for almost 24 years, but in October 2021 I was terminated. Not because I did anything wrong or that I couldn't do my job. The only reason was that I was unsure about having an experimental medical procedure that had no information on long-term effects or side effects. Now the adverse events are showing up and have been confirmed by a recently released document of Pfizer. It is a disgrace that the companies are not being held accountable for them. However, the powers to be still will not let us get our jobs back or offer to reinstate us. I have no job and no wages and have been financially affected. I have also been cut off from family and friends, so have emotionally suffered. Also, not being allowed to enter buildings and shops in my hometown of 60 years and have paid rates for 40 years is a disgrace. It is time this madness stopped. Discrimination is illegal in this country. So why does this council think it is okay for them to discriminate against people that make a personal medical choice? What is this council going to do about preventing this from happening again? Thanks for your time, Rhonda Simmons. To finish up, I would like to add some words of my own. This is me speaking. We are aware of the revoking of most of the COVID vaccine discrimination. However, one major issue is still standing. The unvaccinated are still not allowed to work. I have no doubt that this will change in the near future as well, which brings me to my final question, which is a rhetorical question. How are you going to prevent this situation from happening again? The legislation that allowed all this to happen is still in place. What are you, our council, that is speaking and working for us, the citizens, going to do about this situation? Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tina. So, councillors, that concludes our speakers this evening. So we'll move on to the notice of motion, which is item 2.1. And Councillor Buckley, would you like to move your motion, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to move the motion that the council requests a comprehensive explanation from the Honourable Martin Foley for health inclusive of health data, science and empirical evidence that was used to support the Victorian State Government's decision to implement vaccine mandates and lockdowns.
Great, thanks. Just stand by there and I'll see if we've got a seconder for that. Councillor Stowe seconded it. That's fine. Okay. Would you like to speak to the motion now?
I certainly would. I will take that the councillors have read the rationale in our briefings, in our meeting notes. So I will start by saying that I wish to quote from a favourite author of mine, Virginia Woolf, who said, "Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind." Councillors, this is a motion. It simply just asks for an explanation based on science and data as to why our community has suffered financially, emotionally, and have suffered from discrimination. And this motion supports the previous officer's statement or correction, the petition. I believe that all of our constituents should have free access to the services that they pay for. We have been approached by many in the community who are opposed to mandates, whether they are vaccinated or not. The unvaccinated have been denied access to public spaces, facilities and services in the pursuit of their livelihoods, education and happiness. And these constituents are ratepayers who have paid for these services and, in my view, should be compensated. Councillor Larder of the Snowy Valleys Council on the 21st of April moved a motion calling for a royal commission re the handling of COVID-19 pandemic. Councillor Larder, who raised the concern that his medical practice there had been significant issues with the mRNA vaccine and vaccine injuries. Having recently buried my esteemed father, former Councillor Buckley, I've witnessed firsthand what these injuries can do and the human cost and grief. People should have the right of choice without the threat of losing their jobs and being ostracised from their communities. Victorian mandates and lockdowns are in direct conflict with world's best practices. The WHO recognised that lockdowns and mandates do not work. Our region has suffered from lost employment, lost relationships, businesses and homes and people have been segregated and ostracised. This really is a human rights issue. I observed watching the Federal Senate of Estimates. We've had 89 confirmed deaths from COVID, yet we've had 700 deaths or more that have occurred from vaccines. What has been happening in our communities to our people, in my view, is just not acceptable. People should have the right to choose without the threat of losing their jobs or indeed losing their jobs. And as you know, I have never been silent on this issue from the very beginning, and I will continue to fight for civil liberties and those who are disenfranchised by legislation that is more about political power than common sense. Victoria has been hit with a $2.8 billion cost because of COVID and the state government's position. So we seek an answer from the state government as to why the decisions were made and the evidence to support what those decisions were based on. And I think, councillors, that's a fair request. I certainly will respect the council's decision on this motion, yet will make my longer statement and personal view available to the public. Thank you very much.
Would Councillor Stowe, seconded, do you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm fully vaccinated. I've had 4 jabs, but I don't think we should ever be backward in asking questions. This question is a fair and reasonable question to ask of the people in power, and I support it.
Would any councillors, anybody else like to speak for the motion? Is the motion opposed? Councillor White, sorry, there you are. Thanks, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. I too support Councillor Buckley's motion in that, unfortunately, and for the people who have spoken last council meeting and also tonight, and those who have signed the petition, you did have support and you do have support in this council over this mandate, but unfortunately, as democracy states, we are in the minority, but you still have support in council. And I refer to somebody I spoke with, and it's been mentioned again here tonight, but somebody I spoke with on Saturday after Friday night's announcement of some of the restrictions coming off that said exactly that. I can go to the pub and have a beer, but I need somebody to shout me because I don't have a job and I can't have a job. And I think that is absolutely disgraceful, and the people that it has affected, and this will affect them for years. I mean, how do you make up for, say, not having a job for perhaps 18 months or something like that, you know? And are you welcome when this is all over? Are you still going to be welcome at your old job, or will you sort of have a stain on your record and have to look elsewhere? So I'm fully supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Is the motion opposed? Councillor Greeson.
I'm opposing the motion because I really don't think that asking for information about this is going to change anything. And I also think...
Sorry, Mayor. Councillor Grecian, can you please speak into the microphone, please?
Yes. Councillor Buckley, just direct those comments to me if you would, and I'll just manage the meeting if that's all right. Thank you. Councillor Grecian, can you just lean forward a bit, please?
And I also think that the scientific information is readily available through the Therapeutic Goods Association, and I also think that you know, we are simply obeying the law. This is about a pandemic. It's about saving lives here and internationally. So I don't support the motion because I think it's not going to be constructive.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to speak against the motion. I don't oppose seeking further information, but I don't agree with the rationale. I think if we approach ministers or members of the government, I think it needs to be on a different basis, and I would probably be happy to support a motion that we sought the information, but from a different perspective. As I say, I don't support the rationale. I think that we have been through a pandemic. We are still going through a pandemic, and I think that the restrictions were put in place for a reason. And I think the councillors around the table, we've been accused of lacking compassion and so on. I think from the stories that we've heard, I actually don't think that's true. And just speaking for myself, the decisions that I've made around this are because they're based on what I think is the best thing to do for our community. And that, unfortunately, has meant the loss of jobs and a lot of hardship for people, and I'm really sad to hear the level of discrimination and disadvantage that people have obviously gone through because of the restrictions. But looking back on the decisions that I've made around this, including this one tonight, I don't regret it, and I'm trying my best to do the best that I can for my community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. You stand by, Councillor Buckley. You've got a right to reply, so you'll be right. Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Crook.
I've actually got a question, if that's okay.
I'll allow it this time, but we are in debate.
Okay, well, I'll reframe that. I'm going to speak against the motion for similar reasons to Councillor Uri, not in that I oppose the intention of the motion. I have no issue with that really, but I strongly oppose some of the rhetoric that's in the rationale. I think it's inaccurate, misinformed, and not in the public interest. And I guess I'd like to know whether both the mover of the motion and those in support of it are familiar with Victoria's pandemic management framework, or have actually researched the information on the Therapeutic Goods Administration websites. It would appear to me in a 5-minute Google search right now that there is a wealth of information around the evidence and the scientific rationale that's been used by the government for these measures. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with all the decisions that have been made around this pandemic either. Lockdowns were obviously an incredible imposition on the community. But I also think that the vast majority of people in our Shire who I've been elected to represent have elected to be vaccinated. And that's, 97, 96, however many, in the 90s%. Mm-hmm. I note, unfortunately, the petition before us earlier had less than 100 signatures. Now, I'm not discrediting those people, and I respect their views and their rights to hold them. But in terms of representing the electorate, I feel like this motion doesn't do that justice, so I won't be supporting it.
Thanks. Councillor Van Diggle, would you like to speak for or against the motion?
I'd like to speak for the motion, please. I did have a bunch of thoughts that I've written down, but a lot of it's already been covered. But I have to disagree with Councillor Crook's comments regarding, supporting the majority. I think our role as councillors is to listen to the views of all people, including the minority. We've done that really well in the past with other issues. I think a lot of the issues in the past have been minority groups, vocal minority groups, and I'm really thankful today for everyone that's come and spoken and that's been in touch with us before. I am also triple vaccinated. I have nothing against the vaccination, and probably up until recently I didn't realise the impact that it really has on people. But I looked up the World Health Organization statistics for herd immunity, and on average, diseases to get herd immunity need 75 to 95% vaccination rates. I believe it was polio that required 95% vaccination rates, and we're there. As far as I'm concerned, we're there. So I don't see why there's still mandates in place for workers. I'm really glad that there's been some changes, that now, community members can access our council services and can go to restaurants and can get their basic freedoms back. But I don't agree that they still can't work. I mean, I probably understand maybe in healthcare and aged care, probably to some degree I can respect that. But herd immunity, which is what we were told from the very beginning, that we wanted to reach herd immunity, we're there in terms of vaccination rates and in terms of people have been infected. And I've got lots of other little studies that I've read from professors and public health that have said vaccination mandates should only be used in really dire circumstances when there's a strain that's really infectious and really severe. So whether it's turned on for a matter of weeks, which, I'm not agreeing, I realise that some of the speakers today don't want that, but that is a mechanism. It's not a long-term solution, which it's currently been. So I thank you, Sonia, for bringing this forward. It's been a week for me to really ponder on what you've been saying, and thanks to the community, I think it's time to end the mandates.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I'll be voting against the motion, councillors. I think yesterday we attended Anzac Day, and in the spirit of Anzac, many people in the past made significant sacrifices for the community good, and that was one of the spirits of Anzac. And those of us who have been triple vaccinated may have put aside our ideological views with a view to being able to look after the greater good of the community. And that's one of the views that I've taken around this, that this is about the greater good of the community, and the greater community is that 95%, which I think has been alluded to. I think in a fact check, there's been more than 7,000 people die in Australia of COVID, 2,900 in Victoria alone. And those are the most vulnerable and most vulnerable people. And my choices around that, which I think are equally able to be respected, are about protecting those people, the most vulnerable. And I think that those of us who've made those choices have done that for that reason. It's a disease, it's a pandemic, it's not an ideology. I think the notice of motion asks for information or an explanation. I think that that's been explained comprehensively, and everything else around it I think is what I have problems with. So that's why I won't be voting for it. Councillor Buckley, you have a right of reply. I don't think there's any other comments from around the table.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Look, first of all, I'm a bit shocked that some of the councillors cannot agree with the rationale. It's very clear in our rationale, not what has been spoken about tonight, but that this was about the mandates being in direct conflict with our Shire Council plan. It says equitable access, diversity of people and inclusion, and this is not about anything other than that, and that's what the Minister will see. We have not been able to meet our strategic objectives, which is having an inclusive and caring community that respects and celebrates diversity. I understand that Councillor Reeves has the opinion that Anzac is about community, but it was also about freedom. And people's freedoms and human rights they've been neglected, and they've been vilified for having, making a choice. So, and I think a lot of our soldiers would be horrified to see that loss of freedom in our country. Also, in regards to not understand or not agreeing with the rationale, I understand councillors Yuri, whose husband's a doctor, and councillor Grecian, who is also a doctor, perhaps have a pecuniary interest that this is something
well, stand by, Councillor Buckley. I'll just sanction you on that. Can you speak to the motion rather than making those unnecessary accusations, please?
Oh, not an accusation, an observation.
It was unnecessary, and I'd ask you to retract it, please.
I will retract it, Mayor.
Thank you.
So, in conclusion, I certainly believe that, and I'd implore the councillors, and I agree with Councillor Van Diggle. We've gone beyond the point that we need these mandates to exist. And we should certainly champion that it never happens to our community again. So, councillors, please support us in this motion. I hope it gets across the line. I think it's a fair ask.
Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion is lost. Thanks, councillors. We'll move on to the next item. Item 2.2. There's another notice of motion. Social and affordable housing. And Councillor Van Diggle.
Thank you, Mayor. I put a notice of motion forward tonight that is about social and affordable housing. So the motion is that Council works in partnership with relevant stakeholders, including housing sector service providers, to investigate and identify funding opportunities to increase the provision of social housing and respond to homelessness in East Gippsland. 2, writes to the Minister for Housing, the Honourable Richard Wynne, advising him of Council's willingness to partner with all parties to deliver housing outcomes for our Shire. 3, investigates and identifies existing council-owned and other land that could be considered suitable for the development of new social housing. 4, provides planning support and advice for any social housing development, reporting to Council if there is any material financial implications or requests related to the support. And 5, nominates a councillor to the Outer Gippsland Youth Housing and Support Model Working Group.
Thanks, Councillor Van Diggle. Do we have a seconder for that notice of motion? Councillor Greason, I see you. Terrific. How's the throat going, Councillor Van Diggle? You're going to be able to keep going?
Yes, it's all right. I just will sometimes...
Sorry, stand by, Councillor Van Diggle. Microphone. Sorry, stand by.
I just wonder whether I can propose a slight amendment to the motion to recognise recent movements by the government in regards to social housing in Bairnsdale in particular.
Okay, Malakuta as well, or Bairnsdale?
I'll say Bairnsdale.
Stay with Bairnsdale.
Yeah, at this stage. It's not actually a substantive change, it's more of a minor amendment to the wording.
Okay. Councillor Van Diggle, would you be happy to accept that amendment?
Yes, yeah.
Councillor Crook, there we are.
Read that out.
We'll pop it up on the screen so we can all see what it will look like.
So it would now read, under point 2, that Council writes to the Minister for Housing, the Honourable Richard Wynne, congratulating and thanking him for recent announcements regarding social housing in Bairnsdale and advising him of Council's willingness to partner with all parties to deliver additional housing outcomes for our Shire.
Councillor Van Diggle, are you happy with that amendment? Does that add value to your notice of motion?
Yes, absolutely. When I wrote this, we hadn't had that announcement. So thanks, Tom.
Great.
Thank you.
Terrific. So we have a seconder still in Councillor Greason. That's right. Terrific. Okay. Sorry, there's a COVID brain. So Councillor Greason, are you happy with that amendment?
Yes, the amendment is appropriate. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Van Diggle, are you happy to continue to talk to your motion?
Yes, sure.
Great.
The reason I put this notice of motion forward is we are the level of government that works closest to the people, and we play an active role in providing frontline services that underpin the management of our region. Every day we contribute to the wellbeing of our communities, and by putting this notice of motion forward, I want to put the message out there that to our community that the East Gippsland Shire Council recognises the complexities of homelessness and considers the need for social and affordable housing options within our region. I want to start by mentioning that homelessness and housing insecurity doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. There are many things that can cause homelessness and housing insecurity, including but not limited to domestic violence, unemployment, mental health, family breakdown, and currently a skyrocketing housing market. I acknowledge that local government doesn't typically play a role in the provision of social and affordable housing. However, we do play a role in advocating to the state and federal government for appropriate funding. At the moment, the big housing build is investing $5.3 billion to build more homes for Victorian. However, it says in my rationale that there is no guaranteed investment for East Gippsland, which now obviously isn't the case, but I do believe that we should be eligible for more. Through this notice of motion, we'll be writing to the Minister for Housing, the Honourable Richard Wynne, expressing our willingness to partner with all parties to deliver housing outcomes for our region, as well as stating that the East Gippsland Shire Council will identify existing parcels of land that could be suitable to social and affordable housing projects. So to confirm, we are not saying we will use parcels of land for this, but I think it'd be worth exploring the option of what we have available. The statistics for homelessness is not really anything currently in place because the most recent census data was released in 2016. However, on census night in 2016, nearly 25,000 people were homeless in Victoria. At the bottom of the rationale, if anyone's interested in viewing it online, I have included a range of statistics sourced from the Victorian Housing Register that show the number of affordable housing stock and new lettings in East Gippsland, as well as the number of people trying to access them. We do not have enough housing stock to meet the needs of our community. The ABS defines homelessness as when a person does not have suitable accommodation alternatives. They are considered homeless if their current living situation is in a dwelling that is inadequate, has no tenure, or does not allow them to have control of and access to space for social relations. Homelessness takes many different forms, including sleeping rough, squatting, couch surfing, or in short-term accommodation. Can you imagine the feeling of not knowing where you're going to sleep tonight? Can you imagine the constant instability that will affect all areas of your life? There's currently a group that's already existent, which is the last part of the motion, number 5, which is chaired by G. Jack and Chris McNamara from the Gippsland Homelessness Network. And they're trying to secure funding for a youth refuge model. And that's already been taking place for a number of months. And I think it'd be really important for councillor representation to be on that committee to see how we can support them in that. They're currently developing a business case through Kath Smith from Change Smith Consulting. So they're already quite far into the process, but I think it's really important that we support that. But to summarise, I'm really sorry about a really long rationale that the East Gippsland Shire Council is not directly responsible for supporting needs of homelessness or those at risk of homelessness, but we are in a position to identify existing parcels of land that could be used for the development of social and affordable housing. We play a role in facilitating the planning, approval and development of the land deemed appropriate for such purposes by making things such as rezoning a smoother and quicker process. We cannot wait years until down the track to have a housing strategy. And I know we're working on it at the moment, but I think there's more urgency to it. And we don't have years to tap into these current funding opportunities that are available to us. So we need to be proactive and show our support to the vulnerable people.
Councillor Van Digel, I'm just conscious of time. If you could wind it up, I think we're pretty
finished.
Conscious of that.
That was my last word.
The rationale. It's very comprehensive. Thank you. Yep. Thanks for that, Councillor Van Digel. Councillor Greason, did you wish to speak to the motion?
I'll only add to what Councillor Van Digel has stated by just saying that, you know, in my experience, as a GP, I've looked after many people who couch surf and don't have somewhere to live. It's a problem that's been around for a very long time. It's a serious problem, but it's been made a lot worse through the last couple of years, partly through COVID, partly through the extraordinary buy-up of housing. But, you know, someone who's couch surfing, sleeping in people's living rooms, sharing beds with people, you know, people requiring their medications at regular times of the day, it really doesn't work. So people with any chronic health issue, it's just exacerbated terribly. Yeah. So it's a really important issue, and I thank Councillor Van Digel for her comprehensive statement.
Yep, thank you. It is very comprehensive. Thanks, Kirsten. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri, then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Just briefly, very happy to support the motion, and thank you, Councillor Van Digel, for bringing it forward. You did mention that there have been some announcements recently, and I'm also happy to reiterate that there's been an announcement for 10 social /affordable housing units to be built in Mallacoota by the Victorian Government, as well as 2 short-term modular housing units as temporary housing, so very pleasing to see that. And also you referenced the housing strategy that Council will be developing in the short term, I'm happy to say. So stage 1 of that project includes an assessment of social and affordable housing needs. I think it's really important to approach this. This is an urgent issue. It's a big issue, but I think it's also important to understand where the gaps are and where the need is, so that we can also approach it strategically. So I'm really looking forward to this strategy. That first part of the strategy is scheduled for completion in July, so not too far down the track. Thankfully, not years. Stage 2 includes identifying affordable housing actions, and stage 2 will be completed in late 2022. So very, very pleased to see those timelines in place, but also happy to support the urgency of your notice of motion. Thanks, Councillor Van Digel.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Councillor Buckley.
Councillor Van Buell, it was just a pleasure to work with you briefly on this motion, and I think we're on the right track and fully support the work that you're doing. I think more needs to be done. This is just the beginning, and I look forward to being able to perhaps move motions in the future that we can address different aspects of what the disenfranchised and those who have been subjected to hard times, whether through government legislation or through no fault of their own.
Councillor Buckley, can you just speak to the motion, please?
I am speaking to the motion,
I'm
Mayor.
just asking, so Councillor Buckley, this motion here, so steer clear of government.
Thank you, Mayor.
Your hand is still up, so I presume you've finished? Great, thank you. Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Crook.
Just that there is obviously a need that needs to be met within our Shire and elsewhere, and I welcome this motion and I urge all councillors to support it.
Thanks, councillors. I'm happy to support this too. My only caveat is that we are not going to move into space that is the work of state government. So housing and social housing is the remit of state government, and for us to keep assuming those responsibilities, state government's excellent at cost shifting, and we don't want to invite that. So just walk that line carefully, but otherwise happy to support this. So councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillor. That's carried unanimously. We're on to the third notice of motion. And this is the matter around Nowa Nursery. And Councillor Crook, I think this is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that the Council writes to the Minister for Agriculture, the Honourable Mary Ann Thomas, requesting that the Victorian State Government deliver on their public commitment to build a nursery facility at the former PR Adams sawmill site in Nowa to aid plantation establishment as part of the Gippsland Plantation Investment Program, including undertaking the steps required to fully remediate and decontaminate the site so it's fit for purpose.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Greeson, Councillor Crook, you have a very succinct rationale there.
I do.
Do you like to speak to the motion further?
Yes, thank you.
Good, go for it.
Look, the Victorian Forestry Plan, which is the government's overriding forestry policy platform, has identified and publicly committed to build a nursery facility at Nowa. The site has since been found to be contaminated, and that commitment's been abandoned. I believe that the state government should honour its commitment to the Nowa community and the economic future of all our communities in East Gippsland by going forward and building that nursery facility. And I will add that this is an important step in continuing to deliver the timber and wood products that our society demands, and that this nursery would supply trees for the future establishment of plantations to meet those demands. And it's part of the government rationale to commit all the trees in East Gippsland to the Maryvale pulp facility rather than allow them to be supplied to local sawmills, but hopefully that in time the sawmilling sector will be supplied by the plantation estate, of which this nursery is an important component.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillor Greeson, you seconded this. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Just to say, it's a bit disappointing that this plantation nursery hasn't already started in operation, so I'm very keen to see that happen. And it's also concerning, and I don't know if there was any intention to decontaminate and remediate the site at Nowa, but I would hope there has been the intention to do that. And so I support that happen quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Greeson. Is the motion opposed? I can't see anybody saying that. Councillors, anybody else like to speak to or for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley, go ahead.
Look, I'm going to speak for the motion. However, some of the statements that I just heard, I'm questioning. Certainly the issue around the timber industry, which is being brought to its knees by the state government. I don't understand how we can be talking
So, councillors,
about...
let's speak about the motion, and that is the nursery facility at Nowa, and about that item, please.
Is it not relative to the native timber industry? It was
So
already
we can steer clear of the normative statements about state government. Let's talk about the nursery.
I'm sorry, Mayor, but I think this is all relevant.
Councillor, I'm not having an argument with you. I'm asking you to speak to the motion.
I am speaking to the motion.
Councillor, this is the third time we've had this discussion. Would you speak to the motion, please?
Okay, so basically, the motion, I will support it because I believe that we have a duty of care to ensure that we're doing the very best management practices. I just question what the need will be for it if there's no industry.
Councillors, anybody else like to... Have you finished, Councillor? Yep, you're muted. Thank you. I'm quite happy for you to say, yes, I've finished. Councillors, anybody else like to speak to the motion? I see no one, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? No? Councillor White, got you. Good. Carried unanimously. Thanks, councillors. Thanks, Councillor Crook, bringing that. Thanks, councillors, all of you, for bringing your motions to the table. Now we have Councillor and Delegates' reports. So I'm going to go online first. Councillor White, do you have anything to report?
Just briefly, and it's mainly an apology.
Yep.
A couple of weeks ago at our last meeting, I told anyone who was listening that I was isolating because of the COVID that was around Bairnsdale, because I needed to go to Melbourne for a procedure. So I did that, tested negative, got the treatment, and caught COVID somewhere on the way back.
Yep.
And my apology is to the citizens of Lindenow whom I was to lay a wreath yesterday morning at the dawn service on behalf of the council, and I just so humbly like to apologise to those who organised it and those who participated in the ceremony. If they are watching tonight, that was the reason for my non-appearance, is I'm actually in lockdown. So I just, as I said, humbly apologise again.
Councillor White, I'm sure those people and everybody will completely understand that. Look after yourself, it sneaks up on you, this one. Councillor Van Diggle.
Thanks, Mark. I will submit my written report to Vanessa for more detail. It was a quiet few weeks for me because I did go to Tasmania, so I'm proud to announce I went to Derby. So I'm looking forward to have sort of had a chance to look at what the future of Omeo would look like, which was awesome. But I also just wanted to quickly report on the Youth Ambassador meeting. I got to attend the first Youth Ambassador as, I guess, the official delegate on that committee. Councillor Allen was there, but there was only 3 young people in the whole night. It was school holidays, so it was hard to get engagement, but just wanted to let the councillors know that they were very, very happy that we endorsed their action plan, and they're very excited to have councillors on board. And I did sort of ask them what kind of relationship they'd want from us, and they were very happy that if there was any decisions or any conversations that came to council that young people could advocate on, whether it's any sort of streetscape conversations or whether it's, capital works project that can benefit young people, they'd be really interested in having a say in those matters, and they're really keen to come up with a bit of an advocacy piece for us on a regular basis. So I'm just really excited to be on that committee and to have young people's voices heard more. So I just wanted to forward those comments from the Youth Ambassadors, and the rest of my written report will be given to Vanessa.
Good on you.
In order to save some time.
Thanks for attending that. I was an apology. I was in Sydney getting rained upon at Phantom of the Opera. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. I've been really busy. It's been a lot happening since we've had the lifting of around the mandates. I was in attendance with the native timber industry round table discussions representing timber towns, and that was a terrific meeting. It certainly was, it's a very big issue for East Gippsland, as we know. Our council plan has a strategic objective for which advocates for thriving and diverse economy that attracts investment and generates inclusive local employment. And this is all about jobs, councillors, and it was really important to see an industry that's fighting to make sure that our economy will be a healthy one and that we have the best management practices in Australia, if not the world. So I was really pleased to be part of that and looking forward to seeing East Gippsland, the Shire's position paper on the timber issue. Also, I went to a Rural Councils Victoria meeting. There's a policy that's available that rural councils will be advocating for in the coming federal election. So I hope councillors will have a chance to have a look at that, and I'm happy to relay that information. And one of the good things that, you know, that I really love to do is to be able to go and spend time with my community up here in the high country. So yesterday I was part of the Anzac ceremony, which was highly attended. There were some very passionate discussions around freedom, around the importance of remembering those who fought for our freedoms, and it was a great day. So I will hand it over to the next speaker.
Good on you. Thanks for that, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Allen, you've been busy, like everyone, I think.
Thanks, Mark. Look, I'll just briefly run through this, seeing as we could be here all night, but I attended the seats meeting which was hosted by East Gippsland Shire in Lakes, I forget what dates, 3 Fridays ago, but the highlight of that...
1st of April, wasn't April Fool's Day, was it?
It was.
It was.
The highlight of that meeting was a presentation by Fiona Weigel on our programs and our priorities. And you hear a lot of those sorts of presentations at seats meetings, but everyone, and I mean everyone, after that meeting commented on that was one of the best presentations that we've had. So Fiona, congratulations on that. Of course, the field days were great. We also had a meeting along with CEO Anthony with David Clark of the MAV, and that was a very fruitful discussion, and for me personally very enlightening, just to get a feel of a lot of the things that the MAV does that you don't normally explore. And I also attended the Gippsland Business Awards launch at Traralgon, which was a very, very good morning, and I look forward to seeing who their nominations are and their eventual winners. And quickly, I would also mention that the Anzac ceremony in Lakes Entrance yesterday for the dawn service was really well attended, bigger than I think than it's probably ever been at dawn, and the 11 o'clock one was also a very big crowd. So,
great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Crook.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed the Paynesville Anzac ceremonies the other morning. They were very well attended. There's probably just as many people at the dawn service as there was at the 9 o'clock ceremony, so that was pretty pleasing. Heard from the local school kids, and the RAF base did an excellently timed flyover.
You got the planes. Right
on cue. It was, and by jingoes, they were low. Everybody kind of ducked for cover, and it was great to see the Australian Air Force recognise the contribution of Indigenous Australians to the Anzac legacy too, so that was very pleasing. The Australian Coastal Councils met last week, of which we're of course a member, and I just feel compelled to recognise the difficulties that many people in New South Wales and our partner councils up there are still going through in the aftermath of the devastating floods, many experiencing a second wave of floods in as many months.
Crazy.
The rain up there that has fallen is just unbelievable and quite unprecedented. You know, we've seen average monthly totals being overrun in 24 hours. I'm told there are still cattle washing up on the beaches. so the difficult times are still far from over. They've been using quarries as temporary transfer stations, and in Lismore, at one stage, one of their transfer stations was receiving 750 truckloads of debris and rubbish a day. So those extreme and unprecedented events are, of course, entirely consistent with those predicted under a changing climate brought about by burning fossil fuels. I had a great time at the field days as well, as always, very well attended. Must be one of East Gippsland's favourite days out, I reckon. And earlier late last week rather, I met with the Orbost Chamber of Commerce down in Orbost about the Forest Park redevelopment and the need to integrate the Orbost Arts and Heritage Precinct, which comprises the Slab Hut, Visitors Information Centre and the Exhibition Centre, into the latest Forest Park redevelopment plans. This is clearly a major development for Orbost, Orbost locals and visitors alike, and there's a real need to ensure that we take full advantage of the opportunity to integrate and activate these important elements of the town for their emerging visitor economy, and I look forward to seeing that brought to fruition. And I'll just note that we've got a meeting rescheduled there next month to cover some of those issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillor Stowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I won't rattle on too much about Field Days or Anzac. I was there as well. Field Days went well. However, there was 15 exhibitors didn't turn up because of a number of reasons, mainly lack of staff through COVID and lack of being able to get products, actually. Anzac Parade went well in Bairnsdale. Age shall not weary them. Not sure about that. There's a few age-weary soldiers around. Some of the Vietnam vets are starting to show their age quite markedly. But one of the highlights of the last 3 weeks has been the citizenship ceremony held at St Mary's today. 25 people swore allegiance to our country, and they were welcomed very nicely by the Mayor and Anthony. And I think they take this very seriously and they appreciate this. They bring the family along, they dress up well for it, and it's a big moment in their lives. And it was great to see 4 councillors and Anthony turn up. 4 councillors, the Mayor and Anthony turn up for it. So well done, everybody.
Yep. Hear, well said. Councillor Greeson.
Thank you. I've actually had a busy 3 weeks. So I'm only going to comment on a few things, but I did have a really lovely time. There's a lot of art and dance and music and things happening around the place. But I just wanted to add a little bit to the field days, which I thought was just fantastic. And the East Gippsland Shire staff who pulled that together just really need to be congratulated. They did a lovely job. And that woman who was in the recycle bin, you know, having a great time with any unsuspecting child who walked by, and sort of linking it up with the 3 grown court-made businesses. Just very clever. On the same day, on the 9th of April, I went to the skate and scooter competition at the Bairnsdale Skate Park, which was very well run, and the kids had a great time, and they all took it incredibly seriously. So watching these 4- and 5-year-old kids competing, just stunning, and then very seriously competent teenagers. So it's a really good event, and I'd really like to see it expanded. So, it's held in all the towns with skate parks throughout East Gippsland, can be linked with events held around the coast, and bring in professional coaching and demonstrations. One of the mothers I sat with had taken her sons to a similar event in Eden and talked about the events being held in different towns through New South Wales each month. So that was very good. Professor Lucy Walters and Susie Teagan of the Australian Remote Medical Academy came back to Bairnsdale and to talk about the progress of establishing this unique medical school. It'll be based initially at 4 rural and remote sites and will commence with 5 students at each site. The students will complete their entire training in these sites, and 50% will be Aboriginal. So, the first year will be 5 students in each site, and then the next year 5, and it just builds up the numbers very quickly. There's a lot of interest from the local Aboriginal community and local GPs. The hospital is supportive, and Darren Chester is as well. And the hope is that it might commence in 2023. So I also went to the South Buchan Anzac Day event yesterday, and it was inspirational. Incredible organisation from local people. 50 RAF officers training students there. The 13th Light Horse Brigade and the no, I can't say this, probably the catafalque party with their ceremony. But in conversation with community members after it, the talk quickly went to the importance of ongoing recovery support across the many aspects of individuals, communities and town recovery. And one of the issues we've raised before is of utmost importance is the need for government and aid organisations involved in providing supports and grants to understand that in some respects the need for help is only really starting to be, to manifest now. And in particular, mental health support is a key one. And the withdrawal of funding of these services later this year is coming at the worst time. So this is something that's really important to work on. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Greeson, and well done for being able to weave catafalque into the speech. It's quite a word. Not sure what its origin is. Sounds French or something, Latin. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, I will also submit a brief written report for the meeting minutes, but just to mention a couple of things. I don't think anybody's mentioned Easter yet, but just Easter in Eagle Point went off. The Eagle Point Caravan Park looked absolutely full and was incredibly busy, despite the need for a decreased water activity over the Easter break, which was a bit sad. I want to congratulate the staff also for, despite the fact that we've got a huge and extremely busy CapEx program to deliver, managed to pull out all stops and got finished prior to Easter a couple of key bits of infrastructure. One of them was the top of the Eagle Point jetty. So it was down to bare bones just before the holidays, but just at the start of the holidays, they'd managed to recap that. So it was there for all the holiday makers at the park, which was fantastic. I understand the Omeo Holiday Park managed to be open for Easter as well, which was excellent. Another thing I congratulate them for is being proactive around the unfortunate need to reduce water activities by producing a brochure highlighting things that people could do that weren't around water activities. So well done to the staff for all of those things. And a brief little gem of an event in Orbost. A dance performance put on by the Omeo Dance Studio, which Councillor Greeson also went to. It is a little gem, this studio. It's of exceptional quality, international sort of standard, and if you ever are invited or have another opportunity, I suggest you all go because it's brilliant. And
that's finally, Rosalind's little group, is it?
Yeah, it's Rosalind Crisp. And her partner Andrew, both together. I visited Malakuta for Anzac Day. It's always great to go to Malakuta. The weather was amazing and the dawn service was just spectacular and went off extremely well. So congratulations to the organisers. A highlight was the presence of 22 servicemen and women and the commanding officer from HMAS Choules. So they were a feature at both these services. Lovely to have them there. Such a warm relationship has developed between the Choules and the community. They're always very warmly received. And in fact, I was given a little gift. It was given to me on behalf of council there, which I will present to you, Mr Mayor, when we visit Malakuta for our meeting there in 3 weeks.
That'll be good, and that'll be good. I wonder if that's the place where it should perhaps live, at the Shire office there at Malakuta. What do you think, CEO? We'll think about that, shall we?
I'll take
there's a time and a place for that plaque. It's for the councillors not here. It's a beautiful plaque from HMAS Choules.
And just one more thing to mention, and I think this is important, 25 quilts had been made by the local community to donate to the servicemen and women of HMAS Choules as a gesture of thanks. Quilts for Heroes, it's called. It's part of a wider program, but that was a highlight of the events at Malakuta as well. It was brilliant.
Great, good on you. Thank you, councillors, and in particular, I just wanted to recognise where you've been in the last couple of weeks, and in those intervening couple of weeks, we had another biblical deluge. You probably sort of forgotten that in the fog of the past, but April Fool's Day it started. and we had 200 plus mils of rain at Marlow, and it closed the Princess Highway for a number of days and isolated Genoa to Orbost again, and the Marlow Road again closed. I think the 5th time since October that particular piece of road has been closed. And it shows the vulnerability of our infrastructure to these events. In terms of Easter, Marlow again was really busy, and I had the absolute pleasure of emceeing the 51st Marlow Primary School Fete. And there was a great turnout there. I didn't turn them all away. They stayed, and the school made $15,000 out of that, which was just fantastic. I just wanted to also mention and congratulate Lindenow Lions Club for their work at Field Days. They're the organising entity, and that service club just does a great piece of work, and Ron Alexander and his team should be congratulated, and I really salute them. So councillors, we all who attended acknowledged how important Field Days is, but it doesn't happen by chance. And it's a great collaboration with Ron and Lions and the use of the aerodrome site there. In this last particular period, I was actually struck down by COVID and tested positive on April Fool's Day. And that was about the same time that the road was closed. So I was isolating and isolated by floods in that particular time. I'll publish this, I'll forward this report on, but I will mention again and also acknowledge the councillors who attended the citizenship ceremony today. It really is important that you can come to those events, and I'm really grateful for those of you who did come. It really adds to the gravitas. It's an important ceremony. Some of those people have been going through this citizenship process for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get to that day. So we can't underestimate how important it is for those people who are there for us to acknowledge that hard work and to welcome them.
When you tried to thrust an Australian pot plant into the hands of a 2-year-old baby, she totally rejected that, but she was very happy to take the koala.
The koala, absolutely. So I'm not sure why a koala is nicer than a courier for a 2-year-old, but I certainly misjudged the recipient on that occasion. Anyway, councillors, I'll publish that report, but thank you all for your work in being out in the community. It's really important. And we have to turn up. That's such an important little adage as councillors. The community so value it. Right, let's move on through the agenda, councillors. And we are on to officers' reports 5.1. We're on to Community Infrastructure Grants Program 5.1.1 and General Manager Assets and Environment. Fiona, that would be you, I'd reckon.
That would be me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm very pleased to bring this report to you tonight. As councillors may recall, through some additional funding we received in our capital program, we were able to create this once-off community infrastructure grant funding program, which was targeted at those small communities and small community projects that need a little bit of infrastructure funding to get off the ground. I'm very pleased to advise that we had 27 applications for the program, and we're recommending funding to 16 separate projects. The recommendations are before you in the report tonight. With me tonight is Manager of Community Facilities and Open Space, Wayne Richards, who led the process, and he's available to answer any technical questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Good evening, Wayne. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers around this exciting program? Nearly $500,000 being distributed through this. It's really good. Wow, they're almost silenced. Councillor Buckley.
Look, I just want to speak to some of the things that I see here tonight. I believe there's been a fair distribution throughout our region, and I look forward to seeing some of that money going to places, especially some of the smaller places like the Castless Recreation Reserve public toilet upgrade. I think everyone appreciates a dunny in the bush, so well done for making sure that that these smaller places in our more remote areas are getting a bit of a way in, and I look forward to seeing a bit more of that in the future.
Great. Hang on to those comments, because that would be an excellent way to speak to the motion. That's all right. You've jumped ahead of the gun, but we can cope with that. And that dunny in the bush is at the end of Dead End Road, I think, isn't it? The cemetery. Yeah, the cemetery. So hang on to that. Councillor White, a question.
I'll bring us back to the proper proceedings and ask a question. I visited that Cassilis toilet facility with the CEO, and my question to Fiona is that if we've used grant money to give them a new toilet, but at the time we looked at it, it was Delp's asset, and I'm just asking the question is, I'm not against giving Cassilis this upgrade, but why did it become our responsibility and not Delp's?
Good on you. Good question.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to answer this one. When we were setting up the grant program, we recognised that there are a number of facilities that a council is a committee of management. We have a community committee of management. But there are also a number of committees that are DELP committees of management, and it's therefore very difficult for them to normally seek infrastructure funding from council because it's not our asset and we can't capitalise it. So because we were able to use some grant money to offset this, we determined that some of the projects could be DELP projects. They could be on DELP Crown land rather than council Crown land, recognising that it's really quite difficult sometimes for those small communities to seek funding and find funding for those programs. So hopefully that answers. Otherwise, I'm sure Wayne has a more extensive answer for you. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor White. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor, there's a recommendation there in that case. Do I have a motion there from Councillor Stowe, a seconder from Councillor Crook? Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak?
Yes, thanks, Mark. Look, it's $500,000 and Sonia summed up a lot of it before, but over the years I've seen a lot of public halls falling down, football grounds going to disrepair because small communities can't raise $10,000 and $20,000 and $50,000 to do necessary repairs. So I think this money's been well spent when you see some that, like Sonia mentioned, at the Enzo Mechanics Institute. It's a community hall revitalisation, kitchen upgrade, $45,000. I think this is money well spent, and I think these facilities will serve the local communities well for many years to come.
Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Crook.
Oh, yes, just to reiterate what Councillor Stowe has said there, a great opportunity for communities to seek improvements to community infrastructure, and well done to all those involved. I look forward to seeing some of the upgrades as they take place.
Good on you, terrific. Councillors, the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for the motion or against the motion? In that case, councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors, that's carried unanimously. The next item is 5.1.2, and that's the Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Transport, formerly known as Regional Roads Victoria, formerly known as Vic Roads. So just to put you in the context of who we're dealing with, and Fiona, that will be you again, I dare say.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the report before you tonight is to ratify a Memorandum of Understanding between Council and the Victorian Department of Transport. This would have a 3-year life and would be quite broad in its application. As councils are aware, in times of emergency, whether that be fire, flood, or a storm event, we have a very short window of opportunity to assess the damage to our road network and to submit the necessary documentation to seek funding through the natural disaster funding bodies to actually rectify the works. So this will allow us to work with the department and seek additional resources from their teams in those times to assess that damage and make sure that we're submitting all the necessary paperwork. Councillors might recall that this is the way we approached the assessment of damage relating to the 2019-2020 bushfires, and it's a partnership that's worked very well for us, and we're very grateful for the support. So we're putting the same principles in place here, and seeking your ratification of the Memorandum of Understanding. Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Stowe, then Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Fiona. I note that in the document it says that DOT will invoice council at cost. Could you just explain the benefit to us of having that in the document?
That means that there is no overhead or no profit margin in what they're applying to us. So the costs that they would actually incur, that they pay their officers, would be what we were invoiced. So there's no margin of overhead, no markup.
And that's
involved.
cheaper than us doing the work ourselves?
It's all claimable, so it's by using the department, we would still be using our resources as well. We're not able to claim our existing staff, but we are able to claim additional resources, such as the Department of Transport resources. So there'd be no cost to our ratepayers.
Thank you.
Good question. Councillor Uri.
Thank you. Ms Weigel, was this our initiative? Council's initiative,
I believe that initially, when we were in our fire recovery program phase early on, the department did come to us and say, how can we help? And so, and we, through working with the CEO and the Manager of Works, came up with a Memorandum of Understanding to help drive that assistance. It's an approach they are now taking to other councils. I know they worked with Latrobe City Council the same way during their floods, so I think they trialled it with us first of all, and it's now an approach that's being rolled out more generally. So this is probably the first time that we're having a longer-term Memorandum of Understanding with the department. So I think it takes it to another step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen, did you have a question? Councillor Buckley, go ahead.
Look, perhaps, I'm directing this to Ms Weigel, but perhaps the former mayor, Councillor White, he was the mayor at the time, might be able to clarify this. And I think this perhaps is a response to what the question I'm about to put. Is this in any way relevant to the money? I think it was from memory, because this was before my time, of about 6 million that was spent that perhaps didn't have the right procedures or pathways applied to it, through the Shire Council process. Could you clarify that for me, please?
I'm happy to...
Sorry, we're going to ask Ms Weigel to answer that. I'm not sure what is implied by improper pathways. So, Fiona?
So as we've outlined in the report and in the memorandum itself, this does not replace the need for contractual arrangements. So we had a similar MOU for the last event, and we see this is a gesture of good faith that is then followed up with the need for contractual arrangements. So we've clarified that a little more in this Memorandum of Understanding. So it's very clear that this doesn't replace the need for normal contractual arrangements between the two parties.
Thanks for that. Councillor White, do you have a question?
Yes, that was actually a question that I was going to ask, but I do recall, as Fiona's said, it was pretty much more about crossing T's and dotting I's. There was nothing untoward towards what was done, and it was obviously done as we needed the help, and it was a good outcome in the finish that we got the help, and certainly didn't give ourselves any additional trouble.
No, thank you. That was my recollection as well.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillors, in which case there is a recommendation there. Councillor Allen, Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mark. Look, I see this as a great asset when we have a natural disaster, whatever sort it is. Obviously, our claims have to go in within a certain time frame, and as we found with the fires, the damage was that extensive that we needed all the help we could get, and this just clarifies the responsibilities of each party, and I think it's a great asset for our future disaster management.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Uri.
Yes, I just support Councillor Alan's comments there, but also supporting the recommendation because we've certainly had experience in disaster recovery and response, and however and that includes our staff, can think of ways to make it easier for the next time and more beneficial for the way we work and respond to these difficult situations, then the better it is. So congratulations for bringing this forward.
Yep,
Happily support it.
Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I see no one, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. Councillors, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, CEO. Thanks, councillors. 5.1.3 is capital works and major projects. And Fiona, again, this is another one for you. This is your patch, obviously, in assets and environment. So 5.1.3, councillors.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this is the quarterly report that gives you quite a detailed view of the progress of the Capital Works program for the quarter and the status at the end of the third quarter. It's a report that complements the financial report that you'll be receiving shortly from the General Manager of Business Excellence. Of note in this report is that we have 150 projects on track. We have 13 of them have been withdrawn. We've had 22 completed, and 5 of which were in the first quarter, and 8 that at this point in time are at time risk. Also of note in this report is some changes that we've made to our forecast for the end of the year, which means that our identified carry forward has increased quite significantly to $41 million. Councillors, this doesn't mean that these projects won't be delivered. These are multi-year projects where the current challenges that we have, both from a supply and a resourcing perspective, supply of goods, which is a worldwide issue, and resourcing both internally and the seeking of contractors that are suitable to deliver some of these projects has impacted, unfortunately, on some of these projects. However, having said that, most of those projects were multi-year projects, and it's really just the phasing of the projects that has changed, and we will still be delivering the overall project within the whole of project timeframe. I would also draw your attention to the actual expenditure and the committed expenditure. So at this point in time, we have $23 million of actual expenditure and a further $37 million of committed expenditure, which takes us to over 100%, 111% of our revised forecast for the year, which is now the revised forecast is sitting at that $54 million. So whilst we still have a number of projects that we need to deliver and we will continue to deliver, I think given the market conditions that we're working within, the team and the contractors that we work with has done a really good job to get us to this point. $23 million of delivery would have been a very good end of year figure for us on a normal capital delivery year. So to be at that point by the end of the quarter 3 is a testament to the team. We've also, as detailed in the report, we have awarded 2 contracts under CEO delegation during the quarter, and we have a balance of slightly over $101,000 in our holding account, with a number of transactions both into and out of the holding account during the year. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillors, any questions around this matter? Councillor White.
Thank you. I do recollect that last year at the budget I spoke about the size of this Capital Works project and that we probably would have difficulty in fulfilling our obligations. Now, my question is, as we see so many of the projects are now put on hold or transferred into next year, they all come with a budget My worry now is if we've budgeted for $1 million for a project X somewhere, what is it actually going to cost us when we get around to doing it? Because of recent times we've had to fork out more than the budgeted amount of money to get some projects up and running. So where will that money come from? And surely it won't be the ratepayers.
Thanks, Councillor. Well, that's a good point. There are some issues around procurement and delivery of projects and equipment. So, Ms Weigel, what do you reckon?
So, absolutely, and Councillor, yes, we always knew that this was a very ambitious program to try and deliver in 1 year. It's 3 years in one. However, a lot of it is grant funded, and I thought, agreed that we were going to put forward and make sure we were putting our hand up to try and make sure that grant funding was coming into our community at this time to make the most of those opportunities for our community in terms of community infrastructure and road improvements. It does always come with some risk, and there is risk in every local government is dealing with at the moment with the cost escalations and the supply issues around supply timelines for some of the components of some of our, especially for steel and some of our building projects, which does place more uncertainty than we would have in a normal year. We have therefore, when we've been building our budget for next year, have taken this into consideration and made sure that there is considerable contingency built into the budget to cope with those unknowns and those uncertainties at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. I'm just interested, can you give us the exact amount that has been spent on roads?
I'm happy to take that on notice and bring that figure back to you, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Ms Weigel.
Councillors, any further questions? I'll just have a quick question then, Ms Weigel. Then what's the alternative to not carry forward the projects? To abandon them? Is that really an option?
It's not only if we haven't started a project. And if you look at the report, there's of our 180 projects, most are started, most are on track, and a number of them are completed. So abandoning them would mean that we would have to, if they were partially or fully grant funded, hand back the funding. And we would also need to be explaining to our community why we're abandoning them. In some of these projects, the 30th of June is somewhat an arbitrary figure. The projects have a more than a full year's lifespan, and it's really just the phasing that is impacted in these projects. So our recommendation is that we carry forward, we bring forward that funding. We've been working with all of the grant bodies on any of those projects that might be impacted, and we've received timing variations on those projects because they recognise that East Gippsland Shire isn't the only council that's going through these challenging times, and some programs are issuing blanket variations for all projects in the funding program, recognising those challenges.
Yep. No, thank you. Councillor White.
Thanks, Mark. The question then, following on from the Mayor's question, Fiona, would we be better advised in our next our next financial year, to actually take the foot off the pedal with making application with so much carried forward, because we would just find ourselves in the same position with the quantity of work that won't be done should we take our foot off the accelerator for other future projects until we get ourselves organised.
Interesting.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I believe that we now understand, when we were putting this program together 12 months ago, we didn't understand the supply implications, and no one did, or the cost escalations. We've now factored that into our program. We've also seen that the grant bodies are providing longer time periods for delivery. So we had one funding program that was very challenging because it was a 12-month program. Most of the funding programs now are recognising these challenges that local governments and other community organisations are experiencing and are providing longer timeframes for delivery of the project. So I think that we're better positioned. There will be less funding available that we haven't already secured, it would be my guess. But I think there's still projects that if they're well designed and ready to deliver, we still have the opportunity to put them forward if there's a grant fund available and the timeframes that are a bit longer than we feel that we can meet. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, John. Thanks, Fiona. Councillors, are there any further questions? So there is a recommendation, councillors. Do we have a motion? Councillor Crook. Councillor Allen. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. Look, just briefly to say this is a mammoth effort by council staff here, and I thoroughly commend them. It's a huge capital works program. The circumstances we now find ourselves operating in were, as has been said, completely unforeseen. And I think we're doing a good job. Moving the budget for a project into next financial year is commonplace, and so I recommend the recommendations.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Mark. Look, I think that taking things forward is just prudent. We don't want to send the money back, and I don't think our community wants us to send the money back. And I think our community is benefiting greatly from all these projects. You know, you look everywhere around the Shire, there's great things happening, and that's because our officers have gone and sourced the funds. So rather than being a problem, I think it's a damn good problem to have.
A wicked problem. Yeah. Thank you. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In that case, Councillor White, go ahead.
Oops, I was on mute.
No, you're right. Go ahead.
I would still, I would still support this because the answers have been satisfactory to my questions. Because my concern was that we would have taken on projects that we couldn't deliver on. But if the officers are working towards preserving those funds and getting extensions, then it is good for our region, because we've been fairly well mauled the last few years, and so yeah, I'm prepared to support this because it's a concise report, and you probably got to say the officers have come forward and told us as it is.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor White. Good points, well made, all councillors. Thank you. At which point, councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillor. That's carried unanimously, CEO. Mr Cannizzaro, we're moving into your realm, business excellence. Item 5.2.1, councillors.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled the Civic Recognition and Functions Policy, which is seeking to outline the protocols for the East Gippsland Shire Council. Key points for you to consider tonight, councillors. Firstly, the policy provides guidance regarding when and how we interact with our community to celebrate the work of council and our partners, who and how we welcome guests to our Shire, and how we recognise significant milestones or achievements of our residents. The policy also includes an expanded detail on traditional owner involvement and acknowledgement in our civic events, including how we work with our traditional custodians and the inclusion of a welcome to country for all in-person citizenship ceremonies. Further, it also includes freedom of entry provisions. Such requests can be received from Departments of Defence on occasion where there has been involvement of military and civil units in response to, for example, emergency events. You may recall the HMAS Choules during the 2019-20 Black Summer bushfires and their presence in Mallacoota. We've also had some advice from the Department of Home Affairs and with respect to keys to the Shire and honorary citizenship options. So we've been required to remove or not refer to honorary citizenship, so as not to confuse that with Australian citizenship. So these have been updates through the policy. So with me tonight, Mayor, is Nowa Brady and Luke Robinson, who are available to answer any particular questions you may have. So the report, councillors, is presented to you tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being with us, Nola and Luke. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you. To you, Nola, it's could you just please embellish a little bit on honorary citizens, as distinct from Australian citizens?
Thank you for the question, Councillor White, and through you, Mayor. Honorary citizenships used to be, Council has not bestowed an honorary citizenship going back, I think we looked at 15, 20 years through Council, and they used to be bestowed on people from outside of the Shire area, a bit like keys to the city were formally recognised. But when we tried to understand what position they'd be given today in our community, that's when Luke did the research with the Department of Home and Affairs, and their instruction to us was, for confusion's sake in terms of citizenship, and they weren't used by councils at the moment, to remove those from our policy. So it was a recognition or placement of somebody on efforts or other that they had done for the Shire, but they weren't actually residing in the Shire in terms of citizenship.
Thanks for that, Nola.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Interesting question. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, look, my question is in regards to in the policy statement well, two things. One, the traditional owners. I think that that perhaps we're missing acknowledgement of certain prominent people who have been contributors to the East Gippsland Shire, such as the first settlers. So that's something that I would like to see come before council. Perhaps I might have to move a motion on that. But the other questions in regards to freedom of entry. Eligibility to grant freedom of entry requires a military or civilian unit to demonstrate a significant attachment to East Gippsland Shire. The granting of freedom of entry is in recognition of a unit's achievement while on active service or overseas duty as a mark of respect and gratitude for their efforts in defence of Australia. Can you just explain to me, is this about recognition or I don't understand. Is it allowing military units to come in for a myriad of reasons, whether it's a emergency or whether it's to do the federal government's, bidding, and does this extend? Is this just Australian soldiers or is this overseas?
Good question. So tell about the freedom of entry. Is that you, Nola, or Luke? Luke,
sorry, Luke, can't hear you.
Muted.
Are you jumping in or am I? I'll jump in. Thank you.
Good on you. Go ahead, Nola. Thank
Buckley,
you.
through you, Mayor. The freedom of entry is a Defence Department formality, is the best way to explain it. So when the bushfires were on, we had battalions from Townsville come to support us with the bushfire work that was done, providing services to the community. The formality for them is that they're invited to do so, to come and actually be involved in helping out for the circumstances that we require. So that could be bushfires, it could be floods, or it could be other emergency service requirements. And that recognition is that there was, I believe there was, prior to my time, Councillor White, there was a small ceremony where a certificate was provided to them that we issued to them an invitation to come to the community to undertake those activities. And so it's a Defence Force formality. And it is, I guess it's something that they hold in quite significance in terms of when they come to support communities from out of region. To my knowledge, it's never been issued to a foreign military or defence area. I'm not saying it can't, I just don't know enough about it to know whether it's ever been extended, but we certainly haven't. And several councils have issued freedom of entry to different defence departments for varying reasons when there have been emergency services.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nola. Thanks for the question, Councillor Buckley. Councillor White?
If this isn't a question, although I may ask Anthony perhaps to correct me if I'm wrong, but sorry, Nola, we actually had a unit from New Guinea gain freedom of entry. So they were like a foreign army came and worked tirelessly in the Omeo area, and Anthony and I attended a ceremony there where we were given a dog's paw medallion or something along the lines. Could you please correct me, Andy?
How's your memory, CEO? Do you remember what we did there? Because there was something similar with the Fijian army at Orbost.
Certainly, councillors, a fair bit of bushfire brain over the last...
Yeah, it was a bit of a blur.
However, it was for an engineering corp from the Northern Territory or from Queensland, would be my recollection. I don't believe it was specifically for the Papua New Guineans, although they were there with them at that ceremony, Councillor White, that we attended. It was a paw print.
Thank you.
It's up in the council. It's in the council meeting room.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, and I think I understand that they're very rarely given, so we were quite privileged to receive that.
Good on you. Thanks for the question. Luke, do you remember the situation with the Fijian army in Orbost? We did not quite a freedom of entry. There was something else. And you're still muted, Luke. No, we'll have to take it as an intention to share what the memory was, but we can't hear you tonight. That's all right. There was something that we did with that Fijian army. I remember the celebration. Do you remember, Councillor Crook? You've got your mic on. Are you going to add something, or?
No, I wasn't, but I would pose the question that in future the proposed system here will cover such consequences.
Yep.
Right.
Very good. Thanks, councillors. Any further questions? It's good that we have this documented. Councillors, there's a recommendation. Is there a motion? Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Greason. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to it?
No, I think it's been covered.
Great. Councillor Greason.
I think it's a great document. I just think it's really important that we do acknowledge and recognise the people and communities and organisations that put in extra effort and welcome people to this area. And so I think it's fantastic. I'm very pleased to support it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. Is the motion opposed? I should say. I'll stay to my running sheet. Is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I just add, councillors, that I think it's really important to have it documented, a system and a process, so that one, people don't slip through the gaps if they're supposed to be recognised and there's a process, and number two, we do it consistently and well with everyone at the right time and the right place. So I think it's great to have this document and policy. Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? And one abstinence. Thanks, CEO. Item 5.2.2, councillors, is the MAV Victoria motions. Mr Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors, the report tonight before you is the Municipal Association of Victoria motions. The report is presented tonight for you to consider two motions that we'd like to present to the MAV State Council meeting, which will be held on the 24th of June 2022. The two motions for submission that we're proposing tonight, councillors, is firstly one around the developing strategic partnerships, and that was developed by Councillor Buckley, so thank you, Councillor Buckley. And the second motion is the cost of the environmental effects statements process on local government, again prepared by Councillor Uri, but Mayor at the time when it was first prepared. You recall that the State Council meeting was first proposed to be held on the 12th of November, but given COVID and so on, it's now been scheduled for the 24th of June. Councillors, the officer recommendation before you, I'd like to just point out a minor change that I'd be proposing now before we take it in as a motion. Last Friday, the EES motion, so attachment number 2, was raised at a One Gippsland meeting on Friday last, and very interestingly, the motion was supported by all of those member councils at that meeting, with I think an important addition to the the recommendation, and it was more around the legislative reform aspects of the recommendation that we're proposing for attachment 2. So there is a slight change that we've made to recommendation number 3, which is now, and 4, and we've added a 4th recommendation, and that is before you on the screen. So the change that has been proposed is with recommendation 3, the addition of the words at the end of recommendation 3 is which must include a review of the current legislative framework, and also an inclusion of recommendation 4, which is the council notes the support of this motion by all Gippsland councils through the One Gippsland Alliance. So the recommendation has been incorporated within the officer recommendation prior to you councillors considering it as a motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cannizzaro. That saves us having to have an amendment during the debate. So, excellent. Councillors, are there any questions about this? And it was great that One Gippsland ran with this, so it adds some extra weight. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wondered, since you and the CEO were at that meeting, I wondered if you wouldn't mind commenting on why the members of One Gippsland thought it important to include the bit about the legislative framework and paying attention to that. I understand it's old. It's a very old framework.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Uri. And CEO, I'm happy for you to step in where I miss, but the legislation dates back to 1978. And so it was considered to be dated, even though there were amendments, I think, in 2010 perhaps, or thereabouts, 2012. And the EES process is romping along, as we know. So this particular change to the recommendation 3 doesn't specify in particular the legislation, but the legislative framework around that. So it could include the likes of the process or panels or whatever else the government puts in place, because we recognise that the legislation could be a long wait to be reformed in Parliament. I understand there is a long waiting list. But that doesn't mean we don't have that aspiration to push it up at some stage to have it reformed.
Terrific.
Anything further to add, Mr. CEO? No. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
And I was very buoyed by the enthusiasm around One Gippsland, and all of those councils recognised the spectre of EESs because of Latrobe Valley, wind farms, desalination plants, and even bike tracks, mountain bike tracks in the Yarra Ranges, for example. They are all subject to EESs. Councillors, are there any further questions? Well, in that case, we do have that recommendation there, councillors. Is there a motion? Councillor Greason. Councillor Uri, thanks. Councillor Greason, did you want to speak to the motion?
No, I think they stand as they are.
Great, thank you. Councillor Uri.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the recommendation, which of course will endorse the 2 motions to go to MAV, and I'm happy that both of them are going, if this should pass, will go on to the MAV. I want to speak just specifically about the second one, of course. That's the one I have more familiarity with, but obviously the rationale is explained there for this, but this is the next step really in advocacy, and it's an important piece of advocacy for this council, I think. And just to remember that the genesis of this piece of work, the advocacy, was probably through bitter experience, this council experiencing in the latest EES process how much it actually costs of council's funds to fully examine the often large number of technical documents that are submitted in probably most EES processes, I would imagine, and then to fully participate in the process thereafter often requires engaging legal personality too, in order to do what our council was doing, and that was to fully pursue the best outcome for our community. So it's how much it costs in terms of resources of council funds to fully participate in order to get the best outcome. That's the genesis for this bit of advocacy work, and it's incredibly important, and I'm really pleased that it's going to the MAV, and I'm very grateful to you, Mr Mayor, and the CEO for bringing it up at One Gippsland, and thrilled that it received unanimous support.
Yep, likewise, thanks for those comments, and yeah, we were buoyed by the response we got there too. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Firstly, I will speak to Councillor Uri's motion, and then to go on with my motion, if I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Firstly, I will support the intent of Councillor Uri's motion. However, I don't believe it was the remit of our council to pursue the outcomes in regards to the environmental effects process. It was a state government remit. So, and it came at such a cost to our council rate payers, and it was a divided community. The outcome was sought, it was reached, and of course I support the council's conclusion on that, because that's, you know, perhaps but my personal view is a little different. So I hope that this will achieve the ability so that councils do not have to go down that line again and incur such costs. Moving on, in regards to my motion, I've been really pleased to put this together, and it was done because I have spent many years listening to local people feeling that they are not heard in regards to their issues, and that there is a lot of legislation and policy thrust upon them from a city-centric perspective and centralised governance. So this motion is specifically to ensure that we can empower local community groups, stakeholder groups, and the rationale is very clear that the involvement of all relevant stakeholders to approach natural resource management so that we can together work to identify the threats and potential solutions, and empower landowners and traditional owners, first settlers who have this incredible knowledge around their communities, to develop effective management strategies and actions that will be integrated. So I find that this is if the MAV votes this through, and I really hope that they do, it will empower all of those regional areas to have more say, to be actually part of a ground-up process, a roots-based knowledge process, and I'll keep fighting for that right throughout my councillorship and beyond. So I hope that the councillors are very happy to support this motion. I'll leave it at that.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote then. I think we're at that stage, aren't we? Let's do that. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried unanimously. Next stage is to give it its best shot at State Council. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, we're on to item 5.3. 5.3, so this is Stuart's area. Good evening, Stuart. Welcome to the meeting again. And our first item is planning permit application, the multi-lot subdivision at 8 Newlands Drive, Paynesville. That's 5.3.1, councillors, page 77 of our document.
Thank you, Mayor. And councillors, before you is a report regarding the proposal for a multi-lot subdivision and buildings and works and a partial demolition of a heritage building and some associated roadworks, all at 8 Newlands Drive, Paynesville. The land zoned general residential and is within a short walking distance of the Paynesville Town Centre. And the officer's recommendation is that planning permit is approved subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Some of the key points to be mindful of: the proposal is consistent with state and local policy, particularly for infill development and of fully serviced residential land, which is valuable and is important to get good value from. A planning consultation meeting was held where objectors' concerns were raised and considered. Those concerns have been considered and addressed in the report and the recommendation, and in particular, the proposed subdivision presents a pattern of development that's consistent with the locality and provides a range of lot sizes. The proposal includes measures sufficient to protect and enhance the heritage values of the former school building and the adjacent oak tree as the components that are part of the heritage overlay. The local road network can accommodate the traffic generated by this, or anticipated to be generated by the development. The proposed cul-de-sac or court is located in a way which provides good sight distances in both directions for vehicles entering Newlands Drive, which is important from a safety perspective and enables the orderly development of the property. As mentioned earlier, the lots are within easy walking distance of the town centre and open space and similar. A Section 173 agreement is proposed to require that no further subdivision of land occurs, and to also provide for appropriate setbacks for the carports and garages to ensure that there is on-site or off-street parking. So the proposal provides for efficient use of serviced land and provides residential opportunities in a highly desirable and convenient location. The recommendation is that Council resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant the planning permit, subject to conditions. And also online with me this evening is Martin Richardson, our Manager Planning, who can assist with any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for the overview, Stuart. And councillors, are there any questions? This one had a PCM associated with it and quite a few questions. So I see Tom, then Trevor, and then Councillor White, John.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand this development seeks to develop the land which is subject to a heritage overlay. I wonder if one of the staff, maybe Mr Richardson, could highlight for us what the size of the existing heritage overlay is and how much of that land will actually be subject to development.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I may not be able to give you detailed numbers. However, as Councillor Cook raised in the briefing last week, the proposal does involve the subdivision of the heritage overlay. The critical issues here come from a heritage report provided with the application. And the site, the former Paynesville Primary School building and the associated oak tree are protected under the heritage overlay. The main issue here is that the building and the oak tree have sufficient grounds around them to protect those heritage values. There are 3 residential lots. We'll seek to look on my plan to find those. There are 3 residential lots proposed around the building that do encroach on the heritage overlay. Each of those lots will be subject, when someone seeks to build a dwelling on them, will be subject to a heritage assessment to ensure that the buildings proposed on those lots do not cause any detriment to the heritage values of the school. So the main issue here with the heritage overlay is that the school is visually prominent, and it will be. So the lot on the corner of Newlands Drive and Toodaloo Parade provides about a 15 to 16 metre separation from the oak tree and the school. And the proposed new road provides about 12 to 15 metres separation between any other buildings. So the idea is to retain the visual prominence of the former primary school building and the oak tree, which will be retained. And then any subsequent development on the 3 surrounding lots will also be subject to a heritage assessment in the future to ensure that buildings do not compromise the heritage values of the school. Thank you.
But we are proposing here to build a road through the heritage overlay. Can I also ask, are lots 15 and 16 immediately to the north, are they also within, at least in part, the existing heritage overlay?
They are indeed, yes, Councillor Cook, through you, Mayor. Those lots do encroach on the heritage overlay. The important thing to remember here is that the heritage overlay is intended to protect the heritage values of the school building and the oak tree. There is sufficient land around that building and oak tree to protect those heritage values, and there are proposals within this application to, in fact, restore the school building to its former appearance. If and when development is proposed on the adjoining lots, those proposed dwellings will be subject to an assessment, and they will be required to undertake a heritage assessment to ensure that they are sufficiently separated from the building and the tree, and that the built form is consistent with the heritage values of the school building.
I see, but obviously the heritage overlay would have originally been put in place to protect those heritage values. Are we, by insinuation, if not implication, here saying that that original heritage overlay was in fact wrong, and that by developing a road and putting some houses within the heritage overlay, the original heritage overlay was actually in excess of what was required, and that what will result will protect those heritage values?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, we are possibly agreeing with that proposition. So the heritage overlay came in place due to a nomination by a private resident of the Painesville area in about 1997. And a line was drawn around the school building and the tree. Of course, the entire site was the original Painesville Primary School. However, the significant values that were described in the listing under the planning scheme for the heritage overlay were the building and the tree. So the construction of the road actually involves the removal of the 1970-ish addition to the school building, a modern addition, which is not consistent with heritage values. The construction of the road actually is on land which isn't part of the heritage overlay. The removal of the circa 1970s classroom additions actually helps to restore the building to its original heritage values and creates a street corner on which the building will be more visible on Newlands Drive. So officers' views, and I've read through the heritage report, and my view is that the proposal does actually help to not only preserve but restore the original heritage values of the school, and its visual prominence will be retained. The 3 lots that you refer to, Councillor Cook, through your Mayor, will, in my opinion, not impinge on the heritage values because the school will still be very visually prominent from the street, and the curtilage of the school, the land area around the school, is sufficient to respect those heritage values.
Okay, thank you. Just one final question. Yep. I noticed that there's a condition here for no further subdivision of the blocks, but we obviously have some blocks which would be large enough for subdivision. Would you like to explain the reasoning behind that? I would have thought that being so close to Paynesville, walkable distance to the centre of town there, this would have been a prime opportunity to do some higher density developments.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. It would have been or could have been. In the planning world, we need to assess the applications that are put before us. We have an application here that does provide for a reasonable range of lot sizes. So some of those lots are now around the 500 square metre size, up to 900 square metres and more. So what the subdivision does provide is an opportunity for people to buy a lot and build a smallish house or a largish house, depending on their family circumstances. So it does provide a reasonable range of lot sizes. We may have wished for higher densities. However, we do need to also understand and respect the concerns of local residents about local character. So I think my professional view would be that we have a subdivision here which is a reasonable match between the desires of the local residents to retain local character and also the need to provide a diversity of housing choices for new residents in the town.
Thank you.
Thanks for those good questions and thanks for your responses, Martin. Councillor Stowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Martin, could I ask you a question about traffic? There's been a fair bit of concern from residents down there about the potential for traffic congestion along Newlands Arm. When this was a school, I assume there would have been quite a bit more traffic than there is currently, but now we're putting in an estate, or maybe putting in an estate there. Have we done any traffic counts down there, and what's the capacity of the roads to handle the traffic?
Good question, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. Yes, we did receive concerns from local residents about traffic, and in response to those concerns, we placed traffic counters in February and March, including the Labor Day weekend in March. And what we found, the traffic numbers were consistent with those that were measured in about 2016. So Newlands Drive carries around 1,500 vehicles a day. That's not a particularly large number, given that it's the kind of back way out of Paynesville. So 1,500 vehicles a day equivalents to about 150 an hour in peak, which is one car every minute. So the road is classified under our infrastructure design manual as a local collector road. It's capable of carrying between 3,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day, and it currently carries 1,500. So this development, quite small development, 20-ish lots, will generate somewhere between 120 and 160 vehicle movements a day, which is less than 10% of the current carrying capacity of Newlands Drive. Our assessment based on the traffic counts is that Newlands Drive is well capable of carrying the additional traffic demand, and that traffic safety and access conditions can easily be met within our standard requirements.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. Martin, the larger allotments there that you suggest perhaps could have a substantial home on them, would there be any restriction on a purchaser of the larger lots to putting units on? So in other words, making it like allowing more people to live on one of those big allotments?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, I'm not sure if the Council has received a presentation this afternoon about streets and density from Steve Burgess. And there's been a bit of discussion with my team about density. This is not a high density development. The reason that we have recommended the condition to prevent the further subdivision of lots is to avoid someone buying a 800 square metre lot and creating a battle axe, which is not a good outcome in this location. It is possible under the current state planning provisions that someone could buy a, let's say, 800 square metre lot in this subdivision and apply to build 2 or 3 units on it. That application would be assessed under the planning policy requirements, and the main factors that would come into consideration there would be local character, impact on traffic, impact on local amenity. But it is possible, even with the conditions that we are proposing, for someone to apply to build a multi-residential development on one of those lots. However, I will re-emphasise that that application would be subject to full assessment under the planning scheme and to ensure that it doesn't impact on local amenity. The opportunity on this site for slightly higher density, and I'm not saying high density, I'm saying medium density, means that more people can live within walking or cycling distance of the Paynesville Town Centre, support the local economy, use the local facilities. But any application for units on any of these lots would be subject to the same assessment that we undertake for any other lot in a residential area, and we would be required to consider impacts on local amenity as part of that assessment.
Thanks for that question, Councillor White. And Martin, your response. Councillors, are there any further questions? Thanks, councillors, in which case there is a recommendation there. Pardon me? Sorry, Councillor Buckley, go ahead. Thanks for picking that up.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just a very quick question. There was a concern from a resident in regards to this about traffic lights going into their residency. Is that from the development of the new road, or is that an existing problem that those residents have, that they're worried about the increase of vehicles?
So that would be headlights, the glow of headlights, yep.
Going into their residence, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. A kind of unique situation with this particular development is that most of the properties on the south side of Newlands Drive have 6-foot fences in front of them. So I've been to the site a number of occasions, and I can't recall a property that would be impacted by headlights from cars exiting from the new road, because almost every property on the south side of Newlands Drive has a 5 or 6 foot fence in front of it. So I'd say it's very unlikely that there would be an impact from headlights of cars leaving this site. Possibly no more impact than the headlights of cars from existing properties exiting in a forward direction. So I'd say that's not likely to cause a problem for local residents. And the reality is that 20 lots in Paynesville after 7 o'clock at night, there's not going to be much traffic.
Thank you, Martin.
Yep, thanks for the question. I recall that discussion at the PCM as well. Councillors, are we done with questions? In which case, thanks, councillors, there is a recommendation there. Do I have a motion? Councillor Uri? Yep.
Yes, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Allen? Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only briefly. I think this is an important site in Paynesville, and many of us have got links to the old school here, and I don't believe there are many opportunities like this that come up. So it's an important decision, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about it. There's been opportunity to ask lots of questions, and I think we've landed on a reasonable result, and I think I would quite like to live there, so I'm happy to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mark. I don't think an opportunity like this comes along very often at all, and if I was looking to shift into Paynesville, a central location like that would be gold. And Martin referred to Stephen, his surname escapes me, that gave us a
Stephen
brief...
Burgess.
Burgess, yes,
yep.
On streetscapes, etc. today, and you know, he was telling us that in the centre of cities we need to be intensifying our development. So I think this is a very, very moderate sort of a development, but one that's going to be very much appreciated by the people lucky enough to secure a block.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Councillor Crook?
Yes, I don't think this development pays due consideration to the heritage values of the site and the heritage overlay. I also think it's a huge missed opportunity for the best outcome, whereby the heritage overlay would be greater respected and the density of the lots would be higher, and would maximise the livability of an inner city, in a Paynesville location to the greatest extent possible. I think this is a compromise position and I don't support it.
Thanks for that. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Stowe.
Well, I think this development fits in within the framework of the other houses around the area. It's appropriate, whereas a high-rise or a multi-storey high-density building wouldn't fit in there. And don't forget, just down the street, we're going to get that type of development, which is appropriate to that area, but perhaps not this area.
Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Any other councillors like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri, you have a right of reply. Thank you. Thanks, councillors. Thanks for your contribution. In which case, councillors, I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Councillors, those against? The motion's carried. Thanks, Councillor Crook. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, I'm on to item 6 and I don't think there's any urgent or other business, in which case I need someone to move that we're going into confidential. Councillor Stowe, second to Councillor Crook. Would you like to speak to the motion? No? Do we need to read it out, CEO? We do, I think. So Council will close the meeting to the public in accordance with provisions of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider these following items, which are 7.1 Service Review and 7.2 Chief Executive Officer's Employment and Remuneration Committee Report. That's what we're voting on now. Is that sufficient, Mr Cannizzaro? Thank you. You don't need to speak to the motion. Okay. Is the motion opposed, councillors? I'm being procedural here. In which case I'll put the motion to the vote that we close the meeting. Going to camera. It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors.
Just for the record, there's only 2 public left.
So councillors and viewers, and for the record, thank you for being at our meeting of the 26th of April, and it is 9:29 and I will declare the meeting closed.